Over the weekend, the UFC held their Abu Dhabi card, which is one that usually people feel is an exciting one and one that's usually quite fun through to the prelims, through to the main event. But, I mean, if we're being perfectly honest, it was alright sort of card. It wasn't too great. Some good fights here and there. And honestly, I only feel like talking about the three main fights so far, like those are the ones that had the most impact and were the most memorable. But starting off with the first of those, Sean O'Malley versus Peter Yan. In a lot of people's eyes, I found it really close. I know a lot of the fighters, people like Khabib, a lot of the MMA media found it a robbery, and Sean O'Malley won on a split decision with 2 rounds. Him winning 2 rounds on the judges' scorecards. The first judge had it 29-28. To O'Malley, him winning round 1 and round 3. The second judge had it the same, with O'Malley winning round 1 and round 3. And then the other judge had Peter Yan winning, with him winning the first and the second round. And with this, it's coming into the sort of thing that we see recently in MMA fighting, with the way the fights are scored, especially with takedowns in mind and significant strikes. I mean, for me personally, I wouldn't say it's a crazy sort of robbery, but I definitely didn't expect O'Malley to win that fight, especially watching it happening. I mean, before the fight, I felt that Yan's striking was too precise and too accurate, and he can cause a lot more damage that O'Malley wouldn't be able to keep up with him. But to give fair credit to O'Malley, during the fight, he was able to stand with Yan. He was able to use his reach as an advantage. And when you look at the numbers, when it comes to striking, at least he done a lot better, with him having 84 strikes to 58 strikes under significant strikes. And in round 3, he had 40 to 15. So we know for sure that he definitely won the third round. And then the question goes into, did he actually win the first round? And I mean, when you think about what happened during there, I mean that Yan had 6 successful takedowns, 1 in each round, and with that he logged 5 minutes and 54 seconds of control time, which fair enough might not control into a certain decision, but when you are scoring a fight, takedowns and control time should be taken into account to somewhat. It shouldn't just be if you're on the ground and you're looking for a submission attempt or you're looking for ground and pound. If you are able to take someone down and control them on the floor, you should be scored a point for that. And with that, I think that it is a bit disappointing, especially for the fact that when you look at someone like O'Malley, he does have the reputation for being a media darling of the UFC, and a lot of people have raised eyebrows whether it was a quote fixed decision or something was wrong going in there. So I don't know, it's a difficult one to decide. I'm not going to say it was a complete robbery, but it was a surprise for me personally into when you look at the fight and look what happened, to see that O'Malley was given a decision. But looking into the future for both of these guys, I mean that you look at what happened with Yan, he could be in a future fight with other guys in his decision if someone like Henry Cejudo decides to come back. If he decides to fight a lot of the other guys, Marlon Moraes or guys in that division, it could be something interesting for him. And meanwhile, you look at Sean O'Malley, he could be right in the title picture with them not being that crazy amount of people in their division. I mean, who else could he really fight? I mean, the likes of people like Merab Devashili, Corey Sanhagen, or even Marlon Vera could be another fight for him. But I mean, other than that, who's he really going to fight? I mean, Merab will probably be the best one if he's not going to fight for the title straight away. And for someone like Peter, I think that maybe a fight with Pedro or someone like Ricky Simone, just for him to get one quick fight, just so he can get back in the title picture, considering the fact that he's lost a title decision to Sterling again, and he didn't win this one, so obviously he's not going to get the trilogy, so he needs to fight someone, probably someone lower ranked in the bantamweight division, to see where he stands now. And then looking into the second fight of the evening, the co-main event, we saw that TJ Dillashaw fought Aljamain Sterling, and he lost this one by TKO in the second round due to some ground and pound. But if you were to think about that and you're only to read the result, that wouldn't even tell the whole story of what was going into the fight. So from what we've heard, TJ Dillashaw had dislocated his collarbone or dislocated his socket. So coming into the fight, we knew that he was injured. And obviously, well, we didn't know until we saw what happened. And with that, during the fight week, he didn't have any open workouts. It seemed that his camp was clearly hiding something, And once the fight started, we clearly saw that DC and John Akin Paul Felder clearly saw that he had a broken collarbone and wasn't even able to train fully for the fight. And then we also found out that during the medical examinations, that he was told by Mark Goddard that he did tell him that he did have a broken collarbone, and he made us aware of him during the fight. And even with all this sort of stuff, I think, me personally, I think it's a disgrace, and I think it's shameful by both TJ and his camp and the UFC that this fight even happened in the first place. I mean, this is something that I've said for a while now when it comes to UFC fighters. The pride of MMA fighters is something that hasn't really been seen in a lot of other sports that aren't combat sports. And the problem with this is that when people think they're too tough for their own good, oh, I'm a big tough guy, I'm too proud, I've got too much pride to quit, I've got too much pride to throw in the towel, I've got too much pride to tap out. Eventually, this situation that we haven't seen it yet, but unfortunately I'm a bit of a pessimist with this situation. I feel that one day it's going to kill someone in the UFC, mainly for the fact that when you have a group of people like this who have no reason and they feel that they have to take the quote man's way out and they have to fight like gladiators, it causes a situation where people aren't thinking about their long-term health in the situation and thinking about, yeah, fair enough that I've got a title shot right now, but how is this going to affect me in 10 years? How is it going to affect me in 20 years? How is this going to affect me next week? Am I even going to be able to lift my arm up next week? And speaking about it, Dillashaw said that he blew out his shoulder in April, at the end of April, getting ready for the fight, and he dislocated his shoulder 20 times during his training camp. And fair enough, he said that it was his toughest training camp because of what he had been through emotionally, but he said that he didn't want to wait a year to get another title shot. And even with that, it's completely stupid for me in my opinion, because did you really go into the fight like thinking that you were going to win? I mean, what sort of idiotic decision was that, thinking that going into a fighting with a broken arm is something that a smart person would do? I mean, realistically, you're fighting against Aljamain Sterling. Fair enough, you may not think that he's as good as you, but realistically, you're fighting on one arm, and it's just completely going to be a wipe in the grass for him. And we saw that as soon as the fight started, when you saw that his shoulder was popped, he was literally fighting on one. He barely was even throwing it. And to be honest, other fighters could have got a lot more aggressive and turned under the pressure a lot more and hurt him more. And to be fair to Aljamain, he took him out really quickly and made it really easy for him. He didn't put too much sort of pressure on that sort of arm. He didn't try to get him in a Kimura or get him in any sort of pressure situation with that arm. He just got the ground upon and finished him off quickly. And for me personally, I think that this is a decision that Dana and the UFC need to take seriously and need to do this in the future, where they need to have strict sort of medical examinations to where if a fighter is going to be in a fight, and fair enough, injuries happen during training camp, no one comes into a fight 100%, but if someone's going to come to a fight and they feel injured or they feel in a position where they completely can't compete in a situation where they can't even have a competitive fight, then the fight should just be cancelled straight away. I mean, fair enough that we might not have had a title fight, but it's completely unfair on everyone else and people that paid money, people that bet. There's a lot of money that people could have bet on TJ Dillashaw, not knowing that he was coming to this fight injured, and they just threw their money away. And that's a big concern for everyone, whether it's the betting commissions, the fighting commissions, the UFC themselves, ESPN as a company. I think that this situation has been a lot more underplayed than I think it has been, and I think this needs to be taken a lot more seriously and looked at as a serious situation that shouldn't be allowed to happen. And then looking into the main event of the fight, we have Charles Oliveira versus the challenger and now new champion Islam Makhachev, and Islam finishing Charles Oliveira by arm triangle in round 2 of this fight. Coming into this fight, I favoured Islam slightly, but it was one of those fights where, with everything that we've seen Charles Oliveira do, the way he's been able to get hit and come back up, and he's been able to be a complete badass and be a champion that no one wants to fight on his night, and someone that a lot of people in the division fear and recognize his greatness. It was a really close fight before the fight started, and then once the fight started, we saw that Islam was able to score the takedown a lot easier than I thought, to be honest. I mean, when you look at the Dagestani fighters like him and Khabib, they are able to put the pressure a lot more on the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys, and that's something that we've seen a lot. But with someone like Charles, who is able to fight off his back in guard and is able to get an extreme amount of submissions off his back, I think that while he was able to be taken down quite easily, I don't think that he was defending the takedown as much as he wanted to with his comfortability on the ground. But I think that that's where his problems started, in terms of him being too comfortable with fighting someone like Islam on the ground. And you saw that throughout round one, he was able to get him onto the ground, doing some trips and some sweeps on the floor. And while he wasn't able to do a sort of significant sort of major ground damage on the floor or get any sort of big submission attempt, it did do what people do when they fight Khabib. It did allow him to let the other fighter know that, yeah, I'm going to be able to take you down, and now you have to be careful of the ground attacks. And with that, obviously, when you're fighting a wrestler, that makes their stand-up way more dangerous, because you're always in a situation where you're scared of the takedown. And with that, we saw that Islam, when he was in a situation where he did feel uncomfortable with the pressure that Charles was giving him, he was able to reset, get into his position and fight a bit more comfortably. And with Charles, I think that one of his major failures was, and you saw it in a lot of his more previous fights when he fought the likes of Justin Gaethje and Michael Chandler, when he was knocked down by them, he had the comfortability of the ground game to support him, and understood that if I am knocked down, it's fine if I go on the ground, because once they come into the ground, their Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is not as good as mine, and they're not as comfortable on the ground as me. So as soon as they jump into my guard, it's a situation where I know what I can do right, and there's no way that they're going to be able to stop me or able to finish me in the situation, because I know exactly what they're going to do. But you saw that he made that mistake with Islam at the beginning of round two. They were having a slight striking battle at top, and then Charles tried to throw a high knee or tried to throw a high leg strike, and Islam caught him perfectly with the hook. And from there, Islam jumped straight into the full mount for the arm triangle. Charles tried to pop out and he got him into a side control, but the arm triangle by Islam was too powerful, and you could see that the training that him and Khabib have received by their mentor Abdul Manap, Khabib's father, has been something that has led up to this exact decision. I mean, whenever you heard Khabib and Abdul Manap talking about Islam, they always mention him as the next one up, and the one that is going to be the next one to take up the mantle of the legacy that them two guys have left. I mean, the best thing about it is the fact that throughout the time that Islam has been in the UFC, slowly but surely you've seen his growth as a fighter, as someone who wasn't a great striker. Now he's become someone that is extremely competitive on the feet, is extremely dangerous. When people compare him to Khabib, I think that you can see the difference between him and Khabib on the ground. Khabib is someone that looks to get someone into sort of their cover. He covers his knee with their hand and gets them in the wrist control, and is able to get a lot more ground and pound compared to a lot of other fighters in that era. And then you look at someone like Islam, he doesn't really use the wrist control as much. He looks more for submissions and looks to more control them in the sort of guard and get them into a full mount, or a sort of take their back and get submissions from there, whether even with Kimuras or rear naked chokes. So that's something that's a good thing for him when he gets on the ground. And with this, I mean, when you look at a lot of fighters in the rankings, if he was able to submit someone like Chola Zevera, I don't think there's many other fighters in the featherweight division that can fight him. And when you look at the post-fight interview with them saying that they're going to fight Volkanovski, I do respect Alexander Volkanovski. He's the best fighter in the world at the moment, obviously being pound for pound number one. But I don't think that's a great matchup for him, considering the fact that he was taken down by the likes of Chad Mendes and Brian Ortega, and even saw pressure from there by Max Holloway. And when you look at the size of Islam Makhachev and the size that he has over him, if someone like Islam can take him down and get him in a dangerous position, I think it would be a really, really long night for Alexander. And honestly, I think I would really have Islam as the favourite in that fight. And with the sort of stand-up that Alex has, he would have to use that as his mega strong point and use his high IQ and all the guys at City Kickboxing using their sort of knowledge that they have. But when we've seen with the guys from City Kickboxing, when they do go into high weight class to fight other people, like we saw in the Yan versus Izzy fight, I do think that would be a bit more similar. But I would, in the situation, I do think that Islam would finish Alexander and get him in a situation where he would have to tap out. But like, subscribe, and peace.